Hello everyone. Now if you didn't know, this year I managed to persuade my family to build in a 5-day visit to Cardiff into our family holiday. Now this is the second time that I've been to Cardiff. I went 2 years ago, the other Easter, which is of course when I saw Robot of Sherwood being filmed, but there were some locations that I didn't get to visit that time around, particularly as I spent a whole day in the forest waiting to see Peter Capaldi, so I was able to put together a pretty busy itinerary of locations I wanted to visit this time round, and I thought I'd make a video about it to show you all. Now, it might come as a shock to you to learn that the first location we visited didn't actually have anything to do with Doctor Who whatsoever. Basically, we'd been in Devon for a few days before the trip to Cardiff, and on the way up, on the route that we were taking, we passed Clevedon, which is where some of Broadchurch is filmed. Basically, all the kind of interior and building stuff is done around Clevedon, while the stuff near the coast, for example, where Danny's body was found, is done down at West Bay in Dorset. And after discovering Broadchurch earlier this year, because of the link to Doctor Who with Chris Chibnall, I was very keen to visit some of these locations, and luckily there was a very handy kind of Broadchurch trail that I found online, and we were able to follow that and have a little walk around Clevedon and visit some of the locations used in Broadchurch. What I found most interesting when visiting these locations was how these buildings and parts of Clevedon could be mixed together with parts of West Bay to create this completely fictional town of Broadchurch, but also a completely believable town as well. You know, you wouldn't have thought that various bits, such as the Latimer's house, were found in Clevedon, whereas the actual cliff is in West Bay. And I think it's a real credit to the production team on Broadchurch, that they are able to make this kind of seamless move from one location to another. So visiting the Broadchurch locations was very interesting, and it certainly made me appreciate the work that goes into finding locations and mixing them together to create the fictional town of Broadchurch a lot more. Now, while I was in Clevedon, I heard the first rumour of Doctor Who filming going on in Usk, and of course I was very excited about this because we were going to be in Cardiff for the next few days, and I was really hoping that some location filming would be taking place. So after a quick stop to visit some old family friends in Chepstow, we decided to take a look. Now, by the time we got to Usk, unfortunately, filming had just finished. We actually got back just as Peter Capaldi's car was being driven back to the location base. We basically found this massive field, showground place, full of blue vans and trucks and all sorts of things. It was obviously the location base where the cast and crew come back to eat and rest while filming isn't taking place. And like I say, we managed to ascertain that Peter Capaldi had actually been there earlier in the day at a Pearl Mackie, but unfortunately we were told that they wouldn't be there again on the Thursday or the Friday. This was the Wednesday, of course. But nevertheless, after a good night's sleep at our accommodation, I did manage to persuade my family to go out and drive there again the next morning just to see, just in case anybody famous was there. So on Thursday morning we went back to the base and followed the LSW signs to actually find the location itself. Now, unfortunately, on this occasion, the location was a private residence. I think it's called Cefn Manor, or Cefn Court, something like that. So we weren't actually allowed to drive onto the estate to go and get a really closer look at filming, and I did actually later hear that people who had driven that way had been escorted off by crew members, so it's a good job we didn't go that far. However, we did have a little walk around and glimpsed the house from a field on a public footpath in the distance. But unfortunately, all the locals and crew members that we spoke to told us that we wouldn't be able to get any closer at all, which is a real shame actually, because I was hoping to meet Peter again, or at least Pearl. You know, it would have been nice to see them. But anyway, it turned out on this occasion that unfortunately we wouldn't be able to get any closer to the location, so we proceeded on to visit a different location that had been used in the past. Now, this was Castle Cock, which has been used in Nightmare in Silver for the Hedricksworld Castle, and also the corner of it has been used as a German castle very briefly in Journey's End, the castle that Martha goes to. The castle was very interesting, not least for its Doctor Who connections, but also for the historical element of it as well. It was very interesting, and we got these little audio guide things that you put to your ear, and they tell you stuff about each room as you go into them. So that was a very interesting trip, and I definitely would recommend Castle Cock, and it's quite a surreal place as well, because it looks like such a magical French kind of castle, really. It's not really the kind of thing you'd expect to find in the middle of Wales. So after we'd looked around the castle and had a brief look at the corner used in Journey's End, we proceeded onwards into Forest 4. Now, if you've seen my previous video about Cardiff, you will know that this is where I met Peter Capaldi 2 years ago, on the set of Robot of Sherwood. And I was quite keen to go here again, actually, and quite intrigued to see what it looked like, without all the fans and cast and crew and everything there. And it turned out, actually, it looked very different from how I remembered it. I think it's probably because this is a forest It's a natural area, there are trees growing, and they've probably grown more or less, at a different length to how they were 2 years ago, and also because there weren't massive trucks in the way, but it did look surprisingly different, to me at least, and I didn't feel quite as nostalgic as I thought it would. But anyway, it was still great to go and see the Three Bears Cave up close, because obviously last time we weren't allowed to go up close, there was black and yellow tape keeping us away, so it was nice to go and see what that looked like without all the cast and crew there, but it was a very weird feeling, and it didn't feel quite the same as how it did 2 years ago. Another highlight of the trip came on the Friday morning, when I planned to go and visit Sarah Jane's house from the Sega Adventures, which is located in Penarth. And I was just thinking, we could pull up outside and take a little look at the exterior, not be too intrusive, But suddenly, when we got there, a woman came out, who turned out to be the owner, and we had a little talk to her, and she was just going out to walk her dog, actually. And she said, if you're around later, stick around, and we'll show you the interior of the house. And she walked off, and we were like, oh okay, this is quite interesting. And then a few minutes later, after taking some photos and had a bit of a look at the bits of the house exterior that we were allowed to see without being too intrusive, her husband came out and said, my wife's just rung me up to say you're here, and would you like to come and have a look? So we managed to get inside Sarah Jane's house, which was pretty awesome. The rooms that were used were the hallway and the front room and also the kitchen as well, but the kitchen did look quite different. And of course there was also the garden, but I believe the owners had actually done some work on the garden since filming had taken place. So again, that looked quite different, and you couldn't really recognise it from the show. So that was definitely a very nice, unexpected surprise. And like I say, one of the highlights of the trip, really, because I wasn't expecting to get quite so close to the location. Now after this, we moved on to the Coniston medieval village, which has been used twice in Doctor Who, briefly in Robot of Sherwood for the bit with the sheriff in the village, and then more extensively in The Girl Who Died. But interestingly, actually, it didn't look familiar really at all. I think because, especially in The Girl Who Died, they modified the houses quite a lot to make them look more Viking. But while I was there, I did have a look on my phone, and I managed to find some photos from behind the scenes, which I kind of matched up by standing at the right place to get the right angle. So that one was a little bit disappointing, but it was an interesting place nevertheless, and the fact that they've built this medieval village on the foundations of where one was, hundreds of years ago, is still very interesting. After lunch, our next stop was Leadworth, aka Llandaff. Now, as I say, this was used as Leadworth in the 11th hour, but also a part of the exterior of Llandaff Cathedral was used as the church painted by Vincent van Gogh in Vincent and the Doctor. So we went there first to have a little look inside the cathedral and also at the location around the other side at the exterior, and then we had a brief walk around the cathedral square, which was the main part of Leadworth. But the war memorial was also used briefly in The Family of Blood, right at the end where Tim's an old man and the Doctor's there wearing a poppy with Martha. I did think actually that the cathedral square at the time looked quite different to how it did in the 11th hour, but actually looking back at my photos now, it doesn't look quite that dissimilar. Following this, we had a look at all the stuff around Cardiff city centre, so not down by the bay, and there was also an opportunity to go shopping, including a trip to Forbidden Planet, of course. But the first place we went to was Cathay's Park, which was used in The Last of the Time Lords at the end, but it's also near where Danny Pink was run over at the start of Dark Water. We then had a brief look around the Temple of Peace. I wasn't sure if we'd be able to look around this building or not, but luckily the woman on reception said we could go inside. Excuse the tables and everything. Basically, there was an exam earlier in the morning for university students, I think, and it was slightly annoying to not have the space open and clear, but it was still interesting nevertheless, because obviously this location has been used extensively in almost every series of Doctor Who, really. Starting as Platform 1 all the way back in Series 1, and I think the most recent one was in Nightmare in Silver in Series 7, and of course loads and loads of stuff in between. And it was quite surreal to be in the building, really, having seen it so many times on telly over the years. So that one was very interesting. And then also as we were walking around Cardiff, we passed two other locations very briefly. The place where the TARDIS lands at the end of Deep Breath, outside the Card Factory shop that stood in for Glasgow, and also the Queen's Arcade, which was used right at the start of New Who in Rose, where the Autons attack. To end the day, we took a quick look at another location from Rose, and also the time of the Doctor, Lidstep Flats. Now, as I say, parts of the exterior were used for Rose's flats in Rose and other episodes as well, and then also one block and the field were used in the time of the Doctor for Clara's flats. And the thing that I found most interesting about this location actually was the stairs. I think we've had shots of both Rose and Clara running down those stairs, so it's quite weird to see it up close, really. The next day we set off for St Fagans, which is a museum that's actually made up of lots of different buildings that have apparently been moved from various locations over Wales and brought here to be preserved and rebuilt somehow. And some of these buildings were used in the two-parter Human Nature and the Family of Blood from Series 3, including the exterior of the cottage that the Doctor hides in towards the end of the episode, the square where the thing happens with the piano, and he stops the piano falling on a baby's pram or something. It's a while since I watched the episode. And then the whole ballroom type place where the village ball happens as well. So that was quite an interesting place. Unfortunately though, it was raining quite a bit by the time we left there, so we ended up getting a little bit wet. We then moved on to different house and gardens, which had been used loads in Doctor Who, and the Sarah Jane Adventures also as well. It was used in the Series 3 episode, The Eternity Trap in the Sarah Jane Adventures, as the house that's haunted by ghosts and Erasmus Darkening and stuff like that. And then also in Doctor Who, it was used in the Library two-parter, I think. But of course, the most iconic location on this kind of estate is the Pompeian Garden, used as heaven at the end of Deep Breath, where Missy is, and some have speculated in the past that this is her TARDIS as well. So that was definitely one of the most iconic, recognisable locations we visited over the course of the trip. It was also used, of course, in The Girl Who Waited, briefly as the garden that Amy Pond goes to on Apalachia. And then to finish off a different, we went right to the other end of the garden, where David Tennant was, in The Girl at the Fireplace, behind that stone wall where he's peering over and spying on Madame de Pompadour. So although it was quite wet, we had a great time at different houses and gardens, and there were some really recognisable locations here. Now after this, we had originally planned to go on to Bad Wolf Bay. However, because the weather was just so bad by this point, we ended up aborting that plan completely. But instead, we actually went to have a brief look at Caerphilly Castle, which for some reason closed an hour later than everywhere else. But anyway, Caerphilly Castle has been used in loads of Doctor episodes, too many to mention really. But notably, part of the gatehouse has been used in Sarah Jane as Erasmus Darkening's chambers from the Eternity Trap, and also the Tower of London, where Rani is in Lost in Time. Another room in the gatehouse was used for the Master's resurrection in The End of Time. The courtyard outside was used for the archery contest in Robot of Sherwood, and then at the other end of the castle there's a long corridor which was used in Vampires of Venice when Amy was escaping from the school. Now unfortunately, when we got here there was a wedding reception going on, and the wedding reception was in the Great Hall, which is probably the most iconic room at Caerphilly Castle really. I believe it was used in episodes such as Heaven Sent and The Almost People and The Rebel Flesh, but unfortunately we couldn't go in there because there was a wedding reception. It was quite annoying actually, but it was still a worthwhile trip, and I enjoyed exploring other parts of the castle, looking for rooms and corridors that had been used in episodes. Now Sunday was the day I had been waiting for, the trip to the Doctor Who experience. We'd booked to go at opening time, so in the 10 to 10:30 slot, and that was so we could go on a walking tour at 12 o'clock round Cardiff Bay. We started off with the walkthrough, which is set in a Gallifreyan museum, and it differs to the 11th Doctor walkthrough because you actually have a guide walking you through it. I think he's called the curator of the museum or something like that, and it was quite childish, and at times you couldn't hear what the guy was saying, and the script, you know, it wasn't great. There was a good concept behind it, but I just found it quite childish overall. Although there were some really atmospheric bits, like the Weeping Angel room, I don't really think it was designed with all ages in mind. But I'm not going to complain about it for ages, because obviously I'm older than I was last time I came, and I won't see it through the same eyes. I know my sister enjoyed it, and she's 8, and in particular she enjoyed the bit where you pick stuff up on the way and then put it into a machine at the end and it saves the day or something. So I suppose kids do like it, but I just find it a bit childish personally. The actual experience itself was very interesting, as ever. Basically, downstairs there were TARDISes and stuff from Adventure in Space and Time, such as a recreation of the radiophonic workshop, and props such as the replica newspaper about Kennedy, and a replica first edition annual with David Bradley's first Doctor face on it. There was also Bessie, 80s TARDIS, and the original RTD TARDIS, and then there was a green screen area where you could get your photo taken in front of the TARDIS and in the TARDIS and all sorts of things like that. We opted for a 4-pack where you could get 4 different TARDIS interiors, and I put them up on the screen now, and I will admit that was quite a fun experience. You got to dress up and wear scarves and feathers and hold sonic screwdrivers and things, and me and my brother and sister definitely enjoyed that part of it. You then move upstairs to the upper level, which has various monsters to start with, including those from Series 8, and all the different Cybermen designs, some restored classic monsters, a bit about the companions as well, mostly modern day costumes though, although there were some old ones like Sarah Jane's 5 Doctors outfit, and also Ace's Curse of Fenric outfit. Then of course there are all 13 Doctor outfits there as well, and one thing that I wasn't expecting was actually the Clara Memorial TARDIS. I didn't know that was still there, so it's quite a nice surprise to see that prop in the flesh. I wasn't expecting it, and it is a fantastic prop, really, really well made. You know, the paintwork is just amazing. The main bit upstairs that was of interest to me was the Series 9 section. Basically, there was a walkthrough bit that eventually led to the shop, and you worked through all 12 episodes of Series 9, starting off with you walking into Davros's room from the Series 9 opening two-parter, and then you gradually walk through with various props and costumes from each Series 9 episode. And that was very interesting because obviously they're the most recent episodes, and I remembered seeing a lot of it on screen very recently as well. I think because those episodes were so recent, it felt even more surreal, really. And then you ended up in the shop, which had a great selection of merchandise on offer, including figures, sonic screwdrivers, clothing, replicas, postcards, books, magazines. It had a lot, and I enjoyed spending quite a lot of money in there. I'd love to go there again, really. It's a fantastic shop, and although some of it is a bit overpriced, there are some good deals in there as well, particularly magazines. You can get old DWM issues and specials and things for half price, which is pretty good, but only the most recent ones, of course. We then did the walking tour, which was very interesting. 75 minutes worth of basically walking around Cardiff Bay, going to all these locations. Most of them I've been to before, actually, but it was still interesting because there were some that I hadn't been to in the kind of alleyways around the back of Cardiff Bay, such as Machini's from Deep Breath, the place from the Caretaker, where the policeman finds the Scovox Blitzer inside that old abandoned building, the church from Blink, the coal exchange, although we couldn't go in there obviously because it's derelict now, unfortunately, and lots more places. So that was a good experience and I enjoyed doing that. The tour finished at Ianto's shrine, and then we went back up to Eddie's diner for lunch. The food wasn't that great actually, it was a bit of a disappointment, but we did get to sit in table 11, which is where the Doctor, River, Amy and Rory sat in The Impossible Astronaut, so I'm not complaining. After driving through the tunnel from Planet of the Dead, we took a brief trip to Barry Island to end the day, visiting locations such as the beach and pleasure park from the Sega Adventures episode The Mad Woman in the Attic, and the place where the TARDIS was miniaturised in Flatline. After eating fish and chips on the way home, we arrived back at our accommodation to pack our bags and prepare to leave Cardiff. So that is just about everything that we did. There is a brief bit that I've not mentioned already, which was the Monday morning. The morning that we were going to leave, I discovered they were filming Class at Porter's, which is a bar in Cardiff. So I decided to have a quick look down there before we left. Unfortunately though, when I got there I learned that Porter's was the second location of the day, and the Class cast were already somewhere else, and I wasn't sure where that was, so I didn't get to meet anybody from the Class cast unfortunately, but I did get a brief glimpse at the set, although they weren't filming at the point when I was there. But that was still a very interesting experience, and I'm glad that I went there. The other thing we did was go back to Usk for one last try, but unfortunately again, we didn't get to see anybody, and it was just the same story as before. We weren't sure which cast members were there, if Peter or Pearl was there, and we couldn't get close to them at all. And we also learned that they didn't come back to the location base for their meals. They actually ate on the set itself. It was only the crew that came back for lunch. So that was quite disappointing, but you know, what can you do? And hopefully in the future I'll get another chance to meet Peter and Pearl. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and well done if you got this far. I know it's been quite a long one, so thank you for bearing with me. And please do like the video and comment below if you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon for another top 10. So thank you very much for watching again, and bye for now.